The first tool what we can think of covering is Git. So what's your exposure towards Git? And you tell me whether you want this tool or not. Okay, so if in case you're using it all in the real time already, and if you are pretty much aware of this particular tool, then we can avoid it. But if in case you feel that you need more information about these things, I can cover it.
Okay, let me.
So we are talking about all the DevOps tools. So let me know what you want and what you don't want, so that I can plan accordingly.
Vijay, let me stop you there. Okay, I'm gonna go with what you suggest. What you think is up to current market. I'm a SAP basis. I'm a system administrator, but I haven't used any DevOps tool. I'm not that. I haven't automated anything using DevOps tool. I've been exposed to Ansible to some point in my old company, but it was just like going every day to I cannot even recall what I did in Ansible. That was such a long time ago, but I know what the tools are, but I haven't used them. Let me put it that way.
Okay.
If you think like whatever that we can use that we have to go through, that is up to the market. I know that it's going to be different from the company, but you teach me what you think is more popular, what people use more in the job market.
Understand.
Does that make sense?
Yeah, that makes sense.
Okay.
So we'll start with Git then, and then we'll start with Terraform plus AWS. Terraform with combination of AWS. So we can see how we can use Terraform wisely to configure all the services in AWS like EC2, VPC, security groups, and all such things. And then, yeah, Ansible, though you have some hands-on, if in case you want me to again start from scratch, we can do it. And then Docker, and then Kubernetes, and then finally Jenkins for CI/CD.
Okay.
So in this way, so we will cover, I mean, almost, I mean, since because you are using system administrator, you are a system administrator, I think you will be good with Linux, isn't it?
Okay, just I'm not an expert, just enough to get a job done.
Okay, because almost all the tasks what we are going to do, so it will be on Linux machine.
It's okay.
Yeah.
It's okay. No, you don't need to teach me the basic. If I get to where I don't know any comment, or if you know any website where I can easily find comment, you let me know. But you don't need to. You don't need to. Yeah, I will go through your training for whatever you're using. So it's okay with that.
Okay, then we'll stick with this plan. We'll start with Git and then Terraform plus AWS, and then Ansible, then Docker and Kubernetes, and then Jenkins.
Sounds good.
Yeah, thank you. So today we'll start with Terraform DevOps introduction, and then from tomorrow we'll start going through the tools what I talked about. All right. So, okay. So generally, you go to any IT company. Okay, so you either it is a service-based company or product-based company, whatever it is. So there will be two teams who majorly involved in multiple operations, right? So development team. So what exactly development team does? Okay, so whatever product which we are currently using in market, right? So any product, it would have been gone through some development process, right? So let's say, for example, Facebook or YouTube, whatever application you are using in your mobile or laptop. So those applications are eventually created by some sort of developers from that respective company, right? So YouTube and all these applications would have been developed by Google developers, and Facebook would have been developed by Meta developers, right? So eventually, any product what you are using, the end customers or anybody who is using, so those will be by default developed by developers. What exactly developers do? So I mean, assume that you are a person who has some idea, right? You just have an idea. Like let's say, for example, you wanted to create a food delivery app which will deliver the food in home for people. Okay, so it's just an idea. If you want to implement the idea, eventually you need to have some developers to code and make the product alive according to your idea, right? So this is what development people does. Okay, so to implement your idea, what's the first thing you need to do? You need to hire some developers. What developers does, they perform coding. Okay, so I mean, when you say coding, it completely depends upon the choice of developers or the choice of market. Okay, so what exactly it is trending in market, what exactly uh, which programming language is more reliable. Okay, so according to that, they might prefer which language need to be used. There are a lot of languages you might have heard about, Java or Python or Node.js, .NET, AngularJS. There are many programming languages available in market. So depends upon the use case and what product we are developing. Are we developing a web server? Are we developing an mobile application, Android or iOS application? So it depends upon what product we are developing, and accordingly, the programming language will be chosen, and then developers will start working on those. So that's the primary goal of developers. What's the primary goal of operations, right? So you are being a system administrator, so you might know better about operations, right? So what's the primary goal of operations? So you being a operations person, so you will be more involved in like managing the servers, right? So once after developers complete developing the product, so eventually that product will be deployed on the end servers. Okay, so the servers will be either running in data centers, on-premise data centers what company has, or otherwise the server will be running on cloud like AWS or GCP or Azure, whatever, right? Just give me a moment, just give me a second. Yeah. All right. So as I mentioned, so eventually the servers, whatever we have in on-premise or in the cloud, so it will be completely managed by operations team. There are a lot of variety of teams in operations as well, like networking team and storage team and server team, operating system team, and system administrators. In system administrator itself, there are two types of system administrators, like Linux system administrators and Windows system administrators, and whatnot. Like if in case a company is using a lot about virtualization, you might find an VMware engineer or OpenStack engineer. So these are all people, bunch of people who is going to be part of operations team. Monitoring teams. Okay, so monitoring team will take care of monitoring the complete servers which is running in your data centers and all such things. So this is the default way how IT works. So development team and operation team, these two teams essentially required to have a successful product launched and up and running in market, right?
Okay.
So what's the traditional development process what we have so far? So developers used to work on the product. They will just try to code the product, and then finally, once the coding is ready, they will push it to the end server, and those servers are managed by operations team.
Okay.
Right. So the operations team primary responsibility would be like identifying deploying the servers, deploying the application in the servers, and make sure the server is up and running all the time, like 100% availability. And if server goes down, immediately look into it. And on call, 24/7 on call. So being an on call and uh, trying to make sure that your infrastructure is available all the time, because the servers, whatever it is running, so it might be running the applications which is used by end customers. So eventually the server should be always up and running. And if in case any problem like CPU utilization, memory utilization, if it goes high, it should be identified by the respective people, and it should be fixed immediately. So eventually operations team will be involved on a lot of troubleshooting as well. Right. So what's the problem in this process? This is a traditional process. What's the problem in this process? And we are going to understand what.
It is slow and prone to errors.
Sorry, you're talking something.
No, I'm listening.
Yeah. So there is a big wall of confusion in this process, right? So every time developer is going to say that, okay, so here is my code and I want to deploy it in the server. Okay, eventually when deploying it into the server, then once developer gives the code, developer is ready with the code, he will not be immediately getting the server. Okay, server team will have their own respective process. Okay, first developer need to raise a internal support request, and once the request is raised, they will be it need to be approved by respective managers. Once the approval is done, so operations team server team person might be analyzing the request. Okay, so why you need 4 GB of RAM? Why you need 4 core CPU? What's the requirement? What sort of applications you're running? So all these things will be analyzed. Once it is analyzed, he is going to allocate the virtual machine. Once the virtual machine is allocated, so it will be completely a developer's responsibility to load all the applications. I mean, at certain extent, operations team will help, but in traditional IT, it should be completely taken care by developer. He need to load, let's say for example a developer has created a Java application, so he need to make sure that Java is installed in that respective virtual machine. And once that is done, he will load the code and he will try to run that specific code on the server. So this is a traditional process, but there are a lot of process involved into it, and there are a lot of just give me a moment. Sorry to interrupt again. Yeah, sorry. So there was a electrician in my home for fixing something. That's the reason.
Okay.
Yeah. Yeah. So this is the process, but eventually it involves a lot of process, right? So like you need to create an internal support request and have it approved, and then server team will create a VM, and then you need to load all your dependent applications, and then you need to load your code. And if in case the code is not working in the virtual machine, again a developer might need to go through the process of making the virtual machine adaptable for the code what he has written. So it's quite a lot of process, and due to this particular hectic process, the delivery of product might get delayed. Okay, eventually if it gets delayed, again the blame game starts. Like developer might say you made a delay by giving the server, for giving the server, and server team is going to say that, okay, it's not my fault, so your code is not compatible enough to run in our server. Okay, so it is quite happening everywhere in you might have witnessed since because you are working already, you might have witnessed. So there will be always a conflict between development team and operations team due to this reason, right? So and again, it's going to be a blame game, and escalations might happen, and eventually managers will be involved, and you will be involved in meeting with development team and how efficiently you can improve this process. All these things will happen, right? So, and this process is going to be this particular problem what we are talking about. It is going to be solved by a process called DevOps. Okay, DevOps is not a tool or DevOps is not a technology. So DevOps is just a process. Okay, DevOps says how operations team should work. Okay, like development team has their own process. Okay, you might have heard about agile and scrum methodology, right? So using agile and scrum, so they have their own set of rules and regulations. Like, okay, so what they will do, whatever project they're going to work on, they will split that project into multiple cycles. Okay, sprint 1, sprint 2, sprint 3, sprint 4. Okay, sprint 1 for 2 weeks, sprint 2 for 2 weeks, sprint 3 for 2 weeks, sprint 4 for 2 weeks. Within this 4 sprints, we are going to complete the project. So they define their own set of rules and regulations, and they work accordingly. So by doing that, so they are able to complete the project successfully. But operations team doesn't have such kind of process. They don't have any process involved to make sure that server is properly configured and make sure that server is compatible enough for the code. So that's where DevOps comes into picture. DevOps is going to help to define a process for operations team, how exactly we need to work, what are the tools we need to use to fasten the operations process, what are the automations we need to use to fasten the process. Okay, so provides DevOps is a process which embrace operations team to work in a more robust way. Okay, so which was not the case before. So like operations team was completely scattered across with multiple teams. So when you want some network help, you need to reach out network team. When you want some server help, you need to reach out server team. When you want some
Yeah, like that.
storage related, sorry.
It's still kind of like that. My company uses Agile, and I'm still not
Okay.
trying to understand it because I just started with this company. This is when I started working with Agile, and it doesn't really work the way the paper says it should work. Not like that. You still have to
Yeah.
go to the network team. You still have to go to the DevOps team to ask them to do stuff, and then they don't really interact with the system admin as
Exactly.
paper. So
Even like though we are saying network team and the storage team and server team are all part of operations team, but still they will work independently. And if
yeah,
in case you wanted to work with you want some help with network team, you need to set up a meeting and you need to discuss with
yeah,
them, and then that's how it
exactly.
works.
They have their own Scrum meetings. So they
Yeah.
all their own stand up, and it doesn't really. I don't know how this connect together. The paper says so, but it's not really like that in real life.
Yeah. So DevOps focus on this area and trying to make sure this problem is sorted. I mean, still in many big companies like you are working in SAP, though you have DevOps team, still you are saying that network team is there and server team is there. But if you talk about a startup company or mid-level company, they don't have all these operations team. They don't have networking team and they don't have a server team. They
They
only have a DevOps team who take care of all these things.
okay.
Yeah, so that's where DevOps helps. Okay, it's not a technology or it's not a tool. It's just a process, right?
Okay.
So which every operations team should follow, right? So being a DevOps engineer, right, you're going to work on everything whatever we talked about,
Mhm.
networking and infrastructure handling and monitoring and automating. So instead of having multiple teams scattered across, there will be one DevOps team who take care of everything, which means that a DevOps person should have understanding on all these areas. You should have better understanding on networking. You should have better understanding on operating system. You should have better understanding on automation, right? So that is the ideal goal of DevOps team, and this DevOps team will be very closely working with development team. Okay, so previously developer will write a code and he will get the virtual machine from operations team and he will load all the dependencies and then he will push the code. But right now we are reducing the burden of developer. So developer's responsibility is to just develop the code and push it to the GitHub or Bitbucket or whatever. And once the code comes into GitHub, it is DevOps engineer responsibility to take the code, process the code, and put it into the endpoint like server, right? So that will be the complete responsibility of DevOps engineer. So the companies nowadays just splitting into two. One is a development team and one is DevOps team. Development team focus on developing, DevOps team focus on fetching the end product which is developed by developer and ensure that it is deployed into the respective servers. And as I mentioned, any startup companies or mid-level companies, they might not have many teams like networking, storage, and blah, blah, blah. It will be completely a single operation, a DevOps team who take care of all those things.
Right. Right.
Right. So this is how it's going to be. So like development. So what exactly, how exactly the product is developed? Okay. So let's say, for example, as I mentioned, you have some idea. Like you want to develop a food delivery app, like pizza delivery app. Okay, so what exactly the process is going to be? First, you guys will be planning. Okay, so what sort of programming language we need to use to develop this product, and how much of time we need to develop this product, and how many engineers need to be involved, and all these things will be planned. And then once everything is planned and once the people are hired, the next thing is coding. Okay, development team is going to work on coding those products, the ideas, whatever you have, and make sure that the idea is implemented via code. And once it is done, build. Okay, so build and testing. So here, from here, a DevOps engineer will be coming into picture. So even build is taken care by many DevOps engineers nowadays. Like building means, let's say for example today, if you wanted to install an application in your laptop, let's say for example you wanted to install Google Chrome in your laptop. So what you will do, you will just download a .exe file, or if you are using Mac, you will download .dmg file. Okay, it's going to be a single file. Once the single file is downloaded, you're just going to double click the file and it will automatically extract all the files what it has, and then it will install the application in your laptop. Okay, the binary files will be stored in C drive or whatever, right? So but eventually you're just downloading a single file, but that single file involves hundreds of files. Okay, this is called build process. Okay, so developer is going to develop 100 files or 1000 files. We cannot carry all these 100 files, 1000 files to the end user. Okay, what we are going to do, we are going to compress everything into a single file, like a zip file. Okay, and then we are going to transfer it to the end machine, like mobile or laptop. Let's say for example, I'll give you one more example. You have hundreds of pictures. Okay, and your friend is asking to share all those hundreds of pictures. How you are going to share? You're not going to share all those hundreds of pictures one by one. You will be zipping all those files, 100 photos into one zip file, and you will be sharing it. So he will extract it, so and you will find all the 100 files. That's the same process what you're talking about here. So developer will develop thousands of files, okay, with bunch of code, but you cannot carry all those files to the server, or you cannot carry all those files to the end machine. So we will be compressing everything. They will call it as tar file, they will call it as zip file, they will call it as jar file. Okay, so there are multiple names for it. Okay, so this also process which many companies, in many companies, DevOps engineer also will be involved into this process. They use tools called Maven, Gradle to perform these things. Okay, that comes into build. And then testing. Eventually testing process involves in testing the code, right? The code, whatever it has been written, so it need to be tested. So in this segment, some companies involve DevOps engineer. So DevOps engineer also might require some testing thing, but not extensively. But I would say this is not something which is being taken care in many companies. So many companies have a dedicated testing team in this segment, but testing team will closely work with DevOps team, because end of the day, all this process what we are talking about, it is integrated in CI/CD, Jenkins, right? So Jenkins is going to work on building and testing and deploying the server and all such things. So since because creating that CI/CD pipeline is the responsibility of DevOps engineer, So DevOps engineer will closely work with the testing team and make sure that whatever test cases it is being developed by testing engineer is incorporated in the CI/CD pipeline. Okay, you might not be personally working on creating the use cases, creating the test cases for testing the code. It will be done by testing engineer, but you will be closely working with testing engineer and make sure that that particular automated testing is incorporated into your CI/CD pipeline. Okay, we'll talk about all those things at later point when we are talking about Jenkins. So I'll explain it briefly. But yeah, so you don't need to focus on this part and this part for now, because predominantly in many companies, build is automatically taken care by developer and testing is automatically taken care by testing engineer. You will be just incorporating all those things in the CI/CD. Okay, so our primary, I'm saying this the build and test will be done by DevOps engineer only in 5% of companies. In another 95% of companies, it's been automatically taken care by developer and testing team. Okay, so some companies might expect, okay, so you are a DevOps engineer, you also need to work on building and testing as well. But no, it's not the case everywhere.
Okay.
Yeah. So, and then release and deploy. So the code will be released and then it need to be deployed. It can be deployed in AWS or it can be deployed in on-premise infrastructure or anything. Okay, while deploying, this is where all this infrastructure as a code tool comes into picture, like Terraform, Ansible, all such things will come into picture. So it will help you to create a virtual machine in the endpoint and then deploy the code in the endpoint and all such things and operate. So operate, again here we use Ansible configuration management tools to operate the endpoints, and then finally monitor. So for monitoring we have a lot of things like Datadog, Prometheus, Grafana. All these things will help you to monitor.
Okay.
So this is the overall cycle what we are talking about. So planning and coding phase we are not going to involve. Building and testing phase we might get involved, but not extensively. So if building is taken care by developer and testing is taken care by testing team, we will only be involved in incorporating all those automation into the CI/CD pipeline. So we will closely work with developer and testing team, and we will just make sure it is done in the CI/CD pipeline. And then on all this part, we will be heavily involved: release, deploy, operate, and monitor. For deploy, for release, eventually we'll be using GitHub. Okay, so once the code comes into GitHub, automatically it performs checkout, and Jenkins will be coming into picture in this release. So it is going to perform CI/CD operations. And in deploy, we might use all the cloud platforms and on-premise and Terraform and all such things, and operate. So eventually, to end of the day, you're going to manage bunch of Linux virtual machines running in cloud or on-premise, like hundreds of virtual machines. To operate all those hundreds of virtual machines, let's say you want to perform some patching, or you wanted to update the kernel, or you want to do any operations. For that, we can use Ansible. And monitor, again, as I mentioned, there are many things like Docker, Datadog and Prometheus, Grafana, and all such things.
Okay.
Any questions so far you have?
No, that's good.
Okay. So to be a good DevOps engineer, what's the roadmap? Okay, that's what we are going to discuss. So
With that, I want to know.
yeah, to start with, to be a better DevOps engineer, so these are all the things. There are many optionals here. So I'll tell you what is mandatory and what is optional. But first, so we need to have basic understanding about programming languages. Okay, so we are not going to involved in developing programs.
Why do they always say that you don't need to be a
Just give me a
programmer?
moment. Yeah, sorry. So yeah, as I mentioned, so basic programming language knowledge should be required. I mean, you're not going to develop any programs, but because you're going to closely work with developers, at least you need to have basic understanding about what they are doing, right? So developers might work on Java and Go, Python. If in case like when deploying there are some errors which you are seeing, pipeline is failing because of those reasons. So you might need to be able to do at least first level of investigation and try to understand. And you're not going to troubleshoot or you're not going to fix any issues. At least when you report this issue to developers, you should be able to communicate properly that, okay, this is the issue. Okay, this could have been failed because of this reason. Can you look into it? Right. For this reason, so you need to have some basic understanding about how programming language works and all such things. And again, you don't need to be an expert in all these things. Just a basic understanding would be quite enough. And then next thing is operating system concepts. Okay, eventually you might be good in all these things because you are a system admin. So you need to understand how Linux works, and what is process management and what is virtualization. Okay, how virtual machine works, and what is memory management, and how is storage management, file systems, right? So, and you need to live in terminal. Okay, so you need to you might be good with terminal. You should know all the commands to deal with Linux operating system, because end of the day, everything is all about Linux, and whatever we are doing, everything is going to be on top of Linux. So in that case, you need to be good with Linux. And yeah, so Windows is not mandatory, but because in the development platform or in any company wherever you go, so you will be predominantly dealing with Linux machines. The Linux machine, either it will be on cloud or on premise, that doesn't matter. So you should be good with Linux, right? And you should know all the commands what we are using on day-to-day basis in the terminal. And yeah, so that's something which is mandatory, I would say. And then networking. Okay, so networking again, I'm not going to say that it is mandatory, but being a DevOps engineer, you should be having strong fundamental knowledge in networking. Okay, so what is DNS, how DNS works, and what is HTTP, what is HTTPS. Because so when, like, let's say for example you're dealing with a web server. Okay, suddenly your web server is down, so you need to understand how this web server is working. So what is HTTPS, what is SSL certificate, how certificates are provided to HTTPS, and what we need to do if in case website is down. Okay, so in this case, you need to have better understanding about networking, and you should be able to troubleshoot if in case you are going through some networking issues, like uh, port is not accessible. Okay, so how I can check whether the port is accessible or not? Application is not running in the machine, so what could be the issue? How can I tell it and do the check whether the port is up and running or not? And port mapping, how I can do mapping. And proxy, what is proxy, how I can set up a proxy server. So these are all some sort of things which you should know about, like as I mentioned, like reverse proxy, forward proxy, load balancers, and firewall. These concepts also comes into picture. All right, eventually we will be dealing with firewalls and load balancers. Like load balancer are very essential nowadays, because to have a highly reliable infrastructure, we might use load balancer in the cloud platform or on premise. So yeah, so those things are pretty much important. And web servers. Okay, so predominantly we deal with a lot of like any company, whatever you go, like let's say SAP. So SAP is completely a software as a service company, right? So they provide a software called SAP, right? So there are many companies like Facebook or Google or whatever. So they are like, you just go to a Google and just search a page. It's nothing but a web server. There is a web service running behind it, and there is a whole bunch of operations team and development team working on making sure that the web server is always up and running. In that case, being a DevOps engineer, you should have basic understanding about the web services like Apache, Nginx, Tomcat. And again, here you don't need to have extensive knowledge, but basic understanding like how things are working, how to install Apache, how to make the Apache service up and running, how to make sure that like Apache is running in that specific port, how to make some basic configurational changes with respect to Apache Nginx. So these are all some basic knowledges might be required. And again, um, Yeah, so the mandatory stuff so far I said is operating system and networking. So some basic knowledge is very much required. And web server, again, this is not it's optional for now. Okay, and also it's pretty easy to learn this particular part, and we don't need extensive knowledge. We are not going to work on any HTTP coding, or we are not going to work on building a web server. We just wanted to know how this application is going to work, how this application need to be installed in the endpoint. And then infrastructure as a code. This is a mandatory stuff which we need to work on, because being a DevOps engineer, infrastructure is going to be our primary responsibility. By keeping that in mind, so this part is completely mandatory. So you need to have a better understanding about how to automate the infrastructure using Terraform, or how to manage all your operating system which is running in the cloud platform or on-premise using Ansible or Chef or Puppet, depends upon what tool you are using. And if in case your infrastructure is completely containerized, you need to have better understanding about Docker and Kubernetes, right? So this segment is completely mandatory for DevOps engineer. And then infrastructure. When it comes to infrastructure, eventually you will be using AWS, or I mean any cloud platform or on-premise. Again, this segment is also mandatory for any DevOps engineer. So you should be good enough with any one of the cloud provider, and also if in case you are using on-premise, you should be good with VMware or OpenStack. So yeah, so it depends on what product you are working. And CI/CD. So eventually, CI/CD is going to be a thing which integrates all these things, like because everything is scattered. Like we have infrastructure provisioning tool, we have monitoring tool, we have code management tool like GitHub. So many things are scattered across. All these things are going to be connected and integrated through a single pipeline that is being done by CI/CD tools. There are many tools available in market, but the pretty famous one is Jenkins. Okay, so this is also like kind of a mandatory stuff. So whatever you're seeing in this segment, so these are all mandatory. And monitoring. So eventually we need to work on monitoring part because we are going to work on bunch of servers which is running in on-premise or cloud. So we need to make sure that it is completely available. So their Nagios and Datadog, Prometheus, Grafana, these are the trending tools in market which is used. And log monitoring. So eventually we'll be dealing with a lot of logs. So you might have heard about Splunk and Elasticsearch. So we might also be have basic understanding about how log monitoring is taken care, right? So these are all the predominant stuffs DevOps engineers should be aware of. And yeah, scripting. Okay, so it should be good to have a scripting knowledge, especially shell scripting, since because we are going to work on Linux extensively. So if in many companies doesn't use Ansible, so if in case you want to do some basic automation, you can quickly do some shell scripting and perform that automation. Yeah, so that might be essential. Yeah, so as I mentioned, this part is optional. You don't need to focus on this area. You don't need to, and again, we are not going to work on creating directly some programs. So in that case, you can consider this as an optional part. And operating system knowledge is mandatory, so which you are already up to, and you don't need to focus much on it. So at least if you're at least you're working with terminal every day, which is fine, and every day you are doing some commands in Linux machine, which is fine. So you are on par and you're doing something. And networking fundamentals, yeah, again, as I mentioned, so have some basic understanding about DNS, DHCP, HTTP, HTTPS, and all such things. And then over here, web server, again, this is optional, but it's good to have some basic understanding about all these things. And here, proxy, reverse proxy, load balancer, these are all some basic understanding. These are all comes into networking, which you need to have, and basic understanding. And these are all mandatory parts, okay, which we are going to also see in this training. So infrastructure management using Terraform, operating system management using Ansible, and containerization using Docker and Kubernetes, and CI/CD using Jenkins, and yeah, cloud, we are going to see about AWS. Monitoring, I'm not covering anything. If in case we have time, we can just go through about Grafana and Prometheus, like for at least a couple of hours, and I can tell you how to configure Grafana and Prometheus and how to manage a simple virtual machine from Grafana and Prometheus. So based upon the time bandwidth what we have. Yeah, this is the roadmap, and again, so this is not end of uh, learning. So you have a lot more things to learn, and learning never dies. And always you need to learn when we are working in IT.
I know. So it evolves context constantly, but yeah, this is good. It's a lot, but it's good.
Yeah, it will be an interesting journey. Like if you are a DevOps engineer, so it will be quite challenging as well as interesting. Every day you will be involved in a lot of automation stuffs and troubleshooting. So until unless you feel those things are interesting, so it will be a very interesting job. But if you feel that, okay, I might not be able to do all these things, it's quite heavy for me, then it might be a tough job, right?
Mm.
So it applies for everything, not only DevOps engineer. So you being a system administrator or a developer. So until unless they are feeling fascinated about their job, so all the things will be very much interesting. But if they are fed up and if they are not feeling what they are doing is great, then eventually, like you will get bored and you will not feel to work on it anymore. But according to me, it's an interesting journey. DevOps. I mean, since because I am working in DevOps for quite long time, so I never felt boring because every day we will
It's
be
something you can
having
work on.
different set of challenges, right?
Yeah.
So and and again, different set of tools will be trending in markets, and we will be running behind those tools to understand and how those work, and it eventually keeps you occupied and busy, and you will be always busy in learning something new and keep your mind always uh, open to learn new things.
Mm. Okay.
Yeah. With being said, this is the I can share this document. So I'll create one a Git repository for you, GitHub repository for you, and I am whatever contents we are seeing here, those will be uploaded in the GitHub repository, and I'll share you the link through which you can access. And
Okay.
from tomorrow we'll start with Git, and once we completed with Git, I'll give you we'll see the prerequisites like how you can set up your laptop to continue further, like because until Git everything is fine, but post Git we need to have some virtual machine created in your laptop to perform Terraform, Ansible, Docker, and Kubernetes. So
Okay.
when I come to that point, I'll tell you how you can set up your virtual machine, or if in case you are interested to work on cloud platform completely, we'll see how we can create we can set up the machines in cloud. I can help you on that. So based on that, we can move further and we can just complete the tools whatever we talked about, like Terraform, Ansible, Docker, Kubernetes, Jenkins.
Sounds good. Sounds like a plan.
Yeah. So any tools what we are seeing here, it's completely trending in market, like and also it's open source. When I say open source, it's been used by majority of companies, right? The tools what we are talking about, let's say Terraform. So you might have heard about wherever you go now, people might be
Yeah,
asking
but
for Terraform skills.
that's true. That's true.
Yeah, yeah. And Ansible, it's there in market for quite long and it's pretty famous. And I don't need to tell about Ansible. Like people are asking for Ansible skills, and Docker and Kubernetes. You know how it is booming in market and how it's been used by many companies. And Jenkins, it's a tool which is quite there in market for quite long time, but still it never disappears and it's been used by multiple companies. So anything what we are talking about here, it's been used at least by 80% of companies across. And yeah, so eventually it will not be helpful for you in your current role. It will be helpful for you if in case you are thinking to move ahead in your career, or if you're looking for opportunities.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay. That's why I'm here. Either use it, leverage it for what I do, or It's changed completely. So we see. We see.